Welcome to the Registry Insider. I'm Bill Cypress, CEO and Executive Director for the National Registry of EMTs. And today we're talking about the life study, the Longitudinal Inquiry for Fire and EMS, which is an exciting study that our research team here is undertaking, a longitudinal study. And here, joining me to talk about it is Dr. Ash Panchal. He's our Director of Research in the Fellowship Program here. And I'd like to thank you, Ash, for joining us to talk about the life study.
It's totally my pleasure.
Cool. So what does life mean? What is it at a really high level? Just kind of introduce it to our listeners.
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges that we have when we think about our EMS and fire population is we have an idea now about who is part of our population, right? So we have firefighters, we have EMS clinicians, we do mobile integrated health, all these different things, right? So we have an idea of the demography. What we probably need a better idea of is what are the true risk factors we're faced with. And that is a lot harder to describe. We know there's violence. We know there's mental health challenges. We know that we get exposures. But to what extent do each of these things have? And what's like the cumulative effect? Like what happens to me in my career when I start at the beginning of my career, I'm 5 years in, 10 years in, and I have these repeated exposures. Who am I at the end of that? Do I want to stay in EMS? Do I leave? And what does that mean to my family? What does that mean for insurance? All those crazy little questions that a lot of us have to deal with throughout our careers, and we really don't have any answers. And so this whole idea came out to look for answers for what risk factors were faced. And so the life study is a response to this. Mm-hmm. It's a response to understand what firefighters and EMS clinicians are going through, and how can we define this and better understand it.
Good. So the life study is obviously not something that that the research team here is doing alone, right?
That's true.
There's others who are involved in this. Who else is involved in this? And how has this been received across the fire and EMS community?
Well, that's been the most amazing, and I'll say one of the most thrilling parts of my career so far is that there's not many things that you'll do that everyone will unanimously be like, hey, wait, that's a good idea. You're waiting for people to say, hey, this is crazy. What are you thinking? Mm-hmm. Right? And this is one of the things in my career so far where people are sitting down and saying, okay, tell me about this because I want to be on your side. And so where did this start? This started as a conversation here at the registry and the research committee, and it transitioned immediately to saying, hey, let's talk to some of our stakeholders. Mm-hmm. Let's talk to the U.S. Fire Administration. Let's talk to EMS organizations. Let's talk to all these stakeholders. Let's take it to NEMSAC. Let's take it to FICOMs. Let's see what people think. Let's see if they're interested, and let's take the feedback. And amazingly enough, it started with the Fire Administration, and it started with early conversations to better understand if this would be in line with what the firefighters need to understand. And the response was yes. And what else can we do to help? And it was the most amazing experience because we suddenly got this huge upsurge of support from fire organizations, IAFC, IAFF, across the board, mm-hmm. to the point that they're willing to write a letter of support for the whole process. Then we took it to the EMS organizations, and the response, similar. NAEMT, NEMSI, NAMSP, everyone was in support of
the whole Joint National EMS Leadership Forum.
Exactly. And it was an amazing moment for me to see everyone come together because of one thing, that we all care and we have passion in making sure our colleagues, both fire and EMS, are safe and healthy and they have futures with their families. That's what it comes down to. Mm-hmm. And that's what the whole spirit of the study is. And we're at the beginnings of making this happen. And that's what is so thrilling for me.
So a study like this is obviously not unique. This is not the first longitudinal study that's been done. There's others that have been done.
Yep.
Correct?
Yeah, definitely. So there's a couple of them that we all recognize. So people have heard of the Framingham study, mm-hmm. Looking at cardiovascular risk and lots of other things. The ones that are much more kind of near and dear to what we're talking about is like the nurses' health study, mm-hmm. where they recruited nurses, and it was really an occupational study, which transitions. There's also the physicians' health study, which is out of Harvard, where they did the same thing, where they looked at physicians. Now, here's the really exciting part about both those studies in the past, is that even through looking at occupations, they were able to identify significant risks which are in the population, which affect everybody. So in the nurses' health study, one of the biggest things they looked at was the impact of obesity and breast cancer and looking at tobacco use. like that's something that all of us, every patient in the United States is affected by that in their primary care setting. And so there's things that we can look at: chronic stress, mental health, repeated exposures of traumatic events. All these kind of things are things that we can inform the general populace, and then we can start asking great questions about how to build resilience. Now, talk about how we could impact all of us. We have a mental health crisis in the United States that building resilience would be an amazing piece of that.
So who else is involved in this in addition to you and certainly the research team here at the National Registry?
So we've pulled in a lot of stakeholders to get this going. So as we receive funding for the first phase of developing the life study, we built an oversight committee of EMS and fire stakeholders from the group organizations that we just already mentioned, so that they can provide us continued guidance in the project. Then we started building a research committee, and we have a couple of PIs who are the key PIs of the research committee. And
PIs being principal investigators.
Principal investigators. And Jeff Burgess from the University of Arizona, he is a key individual in the firefighter cancer cohort. Rebecca Cash from Harvard, she is an epidemiologist. Yeah, one of our old fellows, but she is a pivotal individual as a strong epidemiologist who understands EMS and fire. Sarah Janke, who is out of the NDRI. I'm going to screw up the acronym, but the work that she's done in fire and EMS, specifically looking at mental health as well as cardiovascular health, is critical for fire. And pulling in both fire researchers as well as EMS researchers has really given us a team where we can start talking about not only what's happening with the workforce, but starting to talk about the molecular mechanisms behind disease, so we can integrate the concept of trying to understand the underlying pieces that affect our individuals and all our clinicians, and then give us a chance then to generalize that data to the nation.
So at the beginning of your response to my last question, you referenced funding. So where's the funding coming from this? And obviously a study of this magnitude is in the multiple millions of dollars, and also will take a lot of years to have a better appreciation for, correct?
Yeah. So this is the beginnings, right? So the beginnings, we've kind of laid this out in three major phases. The first being a year to really set up what the study should look like, such that we can start submitting for applications to the NIH and other funding organizations. That's really phase 2, where we start really putting out applications, start collecting some prelim data, and phase 3, rolling out the larger study. So when we first started getting this together, we started talking to a lot of our stakeholders, and the state of Florida became really interested in the possibilities because of what the challenges they're having with their workforce. And so we submitted a grant to the state of Florida to start looking at workforce and how we would build up this longitudinal study. And they were excited for our application, and they're our first funder for the study, and they're funding the first phase of the project. And it's funding which is actually originally from the CDC, which is in line with looking at the EMS workforce. And so that's how that funding mechanism worked. And so that's the first phase. Now the second phase is going to be looking for bridge funding as we get ready to submit for NIH grants.
So once your funding is in place and the study's up and running, what's the timeline for this? I mean, a longitudinal in and of itself implies quite a long time, but quantify that for us. How long?
Yeah. So like a lot of times the beginnings of some sort of study like this will be like a 5-year type of process where you're thinking, okay, in this first 5 years, these are going to be our goals. The concept map of something like this is having your primary study and then overlaying on top of that study other R grants. And so it becomes
R grants being
NIH level grants at the highest level, which really trying to describe and do further analysis. So you start with a basic idea. So maybe the idea is I'm looking at chronic inflammation and the effect of stress on a population. So that ends up being the first grant, and you have workforce going on in the background of that. And then you overlay on that, I'm going to look at cardiovascular risk. So that's another 5-year grant. So these are all overlaid grants over time. And that's kind of been the paradigm followed by a lot of these longitudinal studies. And so our hope would be we're looking at 10, 20 years of evaluating. So through the career, my goal would be through the career of the individuals who are as part of the longitudinal group, so that we can actually see what's happening to the population. Now, let's be honest. One of the things that's going to happen is eventually people are going to retire.
Mm-hmm.
And so that population will slowly dwindle, and the study will have to come to completion at one point unless we refresh the longitudinal sample. And that is a completely different question that we'll deal with 20 years down the road.
Yeah, and neither you nor I will be here to worry about that.
I hope I've handed that over.
Yeah. Well, it's an exciting study, and I think it's going to be a big changer, big game changer with our profession. And certainly data will start to emerge and information will come from that data within the first few years, I presume, right?
Yeah, really within the first year of starting enrollment, we're going to start probably finding things and understanding aspects of our population that we had not expected. I mean, one of the biggest limitations we have right now is we really don't understand risk factors, and we don't understand how often we receive these cumulative exposures. And so this will be the first really strong, large-scale, longitudinal effort to understand all these aspects and how they interrelate. There have been other smaller studies looking at this, but never to this grand plan. Yeah, and the most important thing that I can only highlight is nothing like this could ever happen without all the stakeholders. And it's amazing to see the engagement and the excitement behind it.
That is very cool. So where can our viewers and listeners go to find out more about the study, if anything, right now, or where will it be if we don't have it now?
Well, yeah. So right now, we definitely have been reporting out to FICOMs and to NEMSAC. So it's all of the public records. So you can definitely hear her talks on that at both those venues. We are actually launching a website. And so the website will probably launch in the fall, which will give people
fall of 2024.
Yep. Thank you very much. Fall of 2024, which will give people an opportunity to sign up so that you can actually get regular updates of the progress of the trial, and also be able to sign up to volunteer to help with being on the survey team and things like that. So you can actually respond and help the development of the study. Of course, there's going to be a chance to also be recruited as a participant for the study also. And there's going to be a number of sites across the nation that we're going to be doing that also.
Very cool. So quite an exciting study, advantageous study as well. So thank you. I know that the registry, the National Registry, I can speak on behalf of the National Registry, is quite proud to be housing this and to have you on staff here as well as the fellows and launching this initiative. But it's not just the National Registry. I think you clearly stated it's the whole of the fire and EMS community that's involved in this. So this is great stuff, and we're looking forward to hearing more. So thank you for taking time to share this with us today, and we look forward to some updates as you progress.
It'll be my pleasure to give them. Thanks.
Thank you for joining us for this episode. If you wouldn't mind, please click the like and subscribe buttons, as well as the notifications so you can get notifications of upcoming episodes. Also, for the latest and greatest happenings of the National Registry, feel free to go to nrmt.org. Thank you very much. And again, stay safe.